open session. And at this time we have taken advice from our town attorney. So at this time we will resume the conversation related to the possible annexation. We do have a public hearing sheet. So actually I'd like to open and close the public hearing since no one signed up. So public hearing is now complete. With that said, I'll ask if there is a motion to be made.
I'll make a motion to continue.
All right.
I'll second.
All right. Can we specify April 2nd as the continuance date?
That's fine.
All right. Any discussion on the motion to continue? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right. This item, the public hearing has happened, but we will continue this until April 2nd. That is public hearing number 7. Or 6.
Yeah, I think you got ahead there.
6, yeah. All right, thank you. This time we'll move to public hearing number 7. Also Amanda Bunce presenting. Let you jump right in.
Yeah, okay. So this is a big set of UDO amendments. You'll be happy to know I do not have all 28 pages of strike-through underline on slides, nor am I going to go through each line specifically in the text. But generally speaking, these amendments, for the most part, were proposed by the town council during your budget retreat to change the approval authority from master subdivision plans from town council to the technical review committee, based on the fact that subdivisions are an administrative approval. And just as a reminder, administrative approvals are a ministerial task without any room for policy choices or discretion. So if the project meets all the standards of the ordinance, then essentially you're bound to approve it. The applicant should get the approval. An example includes review of subdivisions. So I will highlight the changes. So the highlight of the changes is it combines the process for master subdivision plan and minor subdivision plan, keeping the master subdivision plan terminology. Minor subdivision plans, just to remind you, are those that are 4 lots or less and do not involve new streets, right-of-way dedication. They're not very typical. We see very, very few of those. So for the most part, everything we see are master subdivision plans, and that's why we want to keep that terminology. The amendments also remove all references to and the process for minor subdivision plan accordingly. And as well, the changes include changing all references to final plat for subdivision to master subdivision final plat. Requirements not affected by the proposed changes include neighborhood meetings will still be required for residential master subdivision plans. This will allow the applicant to present the project to those people within 300 feet of the property to get input from those adjacent neighbors and a chance for them to have a conversation before the application is submitted to see if the developer is able or willing to do anything to modify their plan to address concerns of the adjacent property owners.
Can I ask about that one real quick? So when that happened before they had the comments and then it came before us again.
Right.
And we saw those comments.
Yes.
So now you guys will see the comments.
Yes.
And I guess, do they matter? I think they matter to us, but it was unclear what we could do about it. And how will it affect your guys' choices you make.
So when an application is submitted, we read through the neighborhood meeting report to see what concerns were expressed by the adjacent property owners. And if there's anything that, say, we can't compel a developer to change anything, but we can certainly ask. So if there was a particular concern, then we will mention to the developer, is there a way you can make an accommodation or a change? It may be that a concern highlights a needed change in the ordinance. If it's a concern we're seeing over and over again, then it may indicate something we need to investigate further or bring before the planning committee to discuss before staff puts forth the effort in researching and proposing changes. So we do read those reports and take that information into consideration. Those reports will still be available. They're part of the application, so they are visible on the interactive development map, which is another way that people can be informed. So we have the neighborhood ways the community will still continue to be informed is through the neighborhood meeting requirement. posted sign on the property, at least one sign, if not more, on the subject property, and the interactive development map, which is updated frequently as plans are revised.
So I do share Councilman Gant's concern just about there might be things that are important to us that are more not as concrete. You know, there are things that we might want to address, and so what would we do? I sort of agree with him. That there might be things that are concerning to us, but not something that you, as not a policymaker, would get involved in.
I think, there'd be nothing precluding a council member or a member of the public from reaching out to a developer to ask for something, to express a concern to see if that could be addressed. And then if you felt like it was something that should be standard across the board, that's, like I mentioned before, we could investigate whether a UDO amendment was necessary or needed. I did want to point out that should these amendments be approved, we are working on some updates to our neighborhood meeting packet so that the public is more aware of how they can provide input. And the first change will be to add the approving authority beside the application type. This is an excerpt from the letter template that they get. And so this will indicate the approving authority, which we can do regardless of whether these amendments are passed or not. And then also a little blurb on providing input to town council, letting people know when public forum is, and providing the email address for council if prior to this section is contact information for every staff department that reviews the subdivisions. So if they're still not satisfied after talking with staff, then I'm certain you'll probably get feedback.
Is there any way, too, that we could add the neighborhood meeting list or a button on the page of the town website where people can get to it easier? Because loading that development map and trying to look through stuff may not be user-friendly to a lot of people, and it would be more visible for people to be able to see and attend.
There's
I'll
a
have conversation with staff about that.
yeah. Okay. And then finally, one other requirement that is not affected by the proposed changes is that town council will still receive a recommendation from the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Advisory Commission on the recommendation for whether the developer should pay a fee in lieu, dedicate land, provide recreation improvements, or some combination thereof. So that will come to you prior to the technical review committee granting approval of the master subdivision plan. So you will have to make your decision based on the Parks and Rec Advisory Commission prior to staff's approval of the subdivision. Okay. So while working on the amendments to the process as requested, planning staff realized there were other clarifications and amendments necessary, and so I'll summarize those for you. The proposal is to clarify that the Parks, Rec, and Cultural Resources Advisory Commission does review certain rezonings, PUD, T&D, MEC, as well as multifamily site plans rather than all site plans. They do not review non-residential site plans and cannot. Also, to remove and amend outdated text that is no longer applicable related to condominium and townhome developments. There's some antiquated text in there that refers to townhome lots as unit sites. It's very odd, and so we're updating that language. And also to update standards for performance bonds in section 11.3 to be more consistent with other types of performance bonds, and make general formatting and typographical error corrections. I did want to point out in section 11.3, there's 3 words that are proposed to be struck to confirm that the intent is for the guarantee to be 125% of the estimated cost of construction and or installation, and not less than 125%. We don't want to imply that we would require something greater than that. And so all other performance bonds required for installation of infrastructure or whatnot is 125%, so we want to make this consistent as well. And this provision is not related to subdivision improvements, but it's related to zoning compliance issues typically. So if there's a requirement, for instance, to install additional trees or a fence, but the weather, we get rain for like a month every day in a row, and it's just not conducive to that. Rather than hold up plat approval, we take a bond that's 125% of the cost of installation, and then once the installation occurs of whatever that is, then they get their money back.
Was this related to an email we got today about this number?
Perhaps it is, yes.
The yellow change? Okay.
Yes. So that is a summary of all the amendments. Planning Board did recommend approval at their meeting on March 11th, and of course, staff is recommending approval as well. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Maybe a suggestion more than a question, but I think this giving up some of this control, I think it will become more important that we hear feedback about ordinances very, I think, I'm not sure how much of a filter you guys have about what we hear as far as recommended changes, but I think that filter could be pretty low at this point, because getting that feedback would be helpful if we need to change things and kind of discuss those things. So I think it makes communication more important. And but I think that, yeah, that's just a suggestion. I think you communicate very well, but it heightens.
We're real quick. I mean, the planning staff are very quick. If they see something a time or two that doesn't make sense, they want to come to the planning committee and say,
Yeah.
let's get this clarified. Again, it's just trying to lay the rules out so everybody can understand them and they can be enforced appropriately.
That process will become even more important.
Yeah,
if we do this.
I don't think I'm ready to give up the review of the master subdivision plans. I know we talked about it. I'm just hesitant from the council. That's my personal viewpoint.
All right.
And I look at, that was a minor subdivision plan for Crossroads, and we didn't know anything.
Well, if I can pause you there, I just want to make sure you don't have any more questions for staff before we go to
Okay, I
the
don't have
public
any more
hearing.
questions.
And then we'll come back for discussion.
Fine.
Is that all right? Nothing else for staff? All right, I'll open and close the public hearing since no one signed up. Thanks for letting me get that piece of process out of the way. Is there any other comments you had?
I'm done with my comments.
Okay, all right.
So my understanding is if it gets to the master subdivision plan, by that point, we really can't make any changes or request any changes. Is that correct?
That's correct. Since it's an administrative task, if it meets all of the standards of the ordinance, then we're bound to approve it. It's not unlike a minor site plan. If it meets all the standards of the ordinance, then we're bound to approve it.
So I'll comment. I've been asking for this for 3 years because when it became apparent to me that a large source of the frustration that happens at the council level is when we're reviewing a subdivision, but yet the rezoning conditions are already approved, and by being faced with voting against a subdivision plan that meets all of the standards and meets all of the rezoning conditions places both council members in an awkward position because now it's already been rezoned. Let's assume it's passed, even if someone voted against it. Now you end up with saying, am I voting no because I think this is a bad subdivision for this rezoning, even though it meets all the conditions, or am I voting no because I voted no the first time? And it just, I think it creates an awkward, if I could use the word, political situation, not partisan, but political, because then people who have met all the standards and the technical review committee says it checks all the boxes, and now we're looking at it, and if we don't approve it, it actually puts the town in an awkward and perhaps legal limbo situation, or it's certainly risky. So I've asked for this because for the simple fact that the rezoning is the time to get all of the conditions that you need into a parcel, and if it passes with all those conditions, then the request then, in fact, the mandate on staff is to keep the council informed. And so as you were asking about communication, to let us know, which is why over a couple of years ago, we began getting a regular report that has links to everything that's coming in, especially those that are being reviewed by Technical Review Committee. So as a council, we already get an email that has a link that we can click that pulls up the document that's being reviewed for subdivision. I think also the comment that after a rezoning, if there was a condition that you feel like maybe was not strong enough to be a condition, but you really would like to see it in there, then right after the rezoning vote is the best time to talk to someone and say, whoever the developer is, and say, look, these are the kind of things that we'd like for you to include. We know that we can't force it upon you, and we certainly can't do it at the subdivision. So if you'll pardon my comment, it's almost like a false sense of control when the subdivision comes before council. Yes, we could vote no on a subdivision after we have already voted yes on a rezoning, but I believe it puts us in a legally difficult position, and frankly, I don't want to put the town in that kind of position. I'd rather us focus on the place where we can make the most impact, which is at the rezoning state. And if we feel like that there are rezoning requests that are coming that don't meet all of our concerns, then let's vote no, or let's ask for a continuance so we can continue to negotiate. We've done that successfully in the past. Sorry that turned into a monologue, but this has bothered me for 3 years that we continued. I mean, ever since, we ended up here having 5-hour meetings, and it was just, at some point you have to say, what's the role of the Technical Review Committee? They do a technical review, right? What's the role of the council? We would do policy review, and we have the control and the discretionary decisions at rezoning. And that's where I think we should exercise it. I also agree that being informed is very, very important, and I don't want us to be in a position where we don't know something. Certainly people reach out to all council members and say, what's going on with that development, or hey, how did that get approved with a right in, right out? Right? We should have the understanding to know that either it was a condition or it turned out to be the right thing for traffic impact assessment. But either way, we should be armed with information. But the master subdivision plan is, in my opinion, not the time to use that as a point of leverage to be fed information. So with that said, I support the changes here, and I hope the council will as well. Because we all have families. We'd like to get out of here, let the staff do their job, let us do our job.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second for approval. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I've always wanted to. I only want to vote when it really matters. So
Okay,
I'm in support of this.
all right, thank you.
Well, I just think it's the last time that you have an opportunity to massage the thing, even though you don't have the ability to say no, but you can say, I had 10 emails about this thing and they're negative. What can you do, developer?
But
That's my
they
personal-
always say the same thing, which is we'll look at it, right? Because they know. I mean, I'm being honest. They say the same thing. We'll look at it, and I'm not saying that they're being devious. I'm not saying that they're being dishonest, but that's the best answer you're ever going to get because they know that these are the rezoning conditions that were imposed upon them, and if you vote no, they know that they've got a case to hold against us. So best way to do that is at rezoning, and immediately afterwards, even if you think it's not a condition you can impose, if you want to appeal to their better sense of nature or put them in contact with somebody who can help them implement something that you want implemented, right after the rezoning request is a really good time to do that. And then certainly staff can be aware of any conversations that happen post rezoning vote so that they can be aware and have that conversation as the subdivision plan is being put together. So, sorry, there I go, monologuing again.
So,
we have a motion, oh, go ahead.
so if the council gets input from neighbors about something that's going through the subdivision approval process, if you let me know what that is, I can communicate that to the planning professionals that are leading that particular project and say, this is a concern. It may not have come out in the neighborhood meeting, maybe it did, but it's a concern. Can you work with the developer on fixing this issue? And then they'll hear from the developer and their engineers at the TRC meeting, and then they can get back to me and I can get back to you. I mean, that we can keep that, especially if you're getting a lot of feedback. And I think our planners are pretty good at working with the engineers, within the bounds of the UDO, but also, help us out with this because this is what we're hearing. And I think there's some engineers here in the audience that would probably tell you that the staff say, can you help us out with this concern? And we'll continue to do that. So if you let me know, we're getting beat up. I've gotten a dozen emails about this. Let us try to get that fixed for you.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that input. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no.
No,
All right, that passes 4-1. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, Councilman?
not at all.
All right. Thank you. And now that takes us to public hearing number 8. Feel free to continue. Pick up where you left off with a different topic, if that's possible.
Just trying to stay organized. Okay. The next set of UDO amendments, there are 3, so as typical, I'll pause after each one to see if you have any questions. The first 2 were actually requested by the Planning Committee. So this first one is amendments to 3 different sections in order to amend the use bar or nightclub, the name of that use to bar, nightclub, wine bar, or tap room, primarily to ensure that it's known that the wine bar and tap room uses fall into the same classification as bar and nightclub. Additionally, the use is proposed to be added to the neighborhood business and the downtown business zoning districts as a special use. This use is only allowed as a special use where it is permitted. And additionally, to allow it potentially to be located within the small town character overlay district as well, within, again, a district that also permits that use. So this is the definition, which reflects the change, adding the terminology. And the supplemental standard for this use, the main change here is the terminology and then striking the last sentence, which is essentially just telling you to look at the definition, so it's not necessary. So that's the amendments for the first, that's summary of the first amendments. You have any questions? It's late. Okay, second amendment is to the microbrewery use to primarily to remove the maximum percentage of sales from on-premise consumption, set a minimum production amount, and clarify that food sales are permitted. Also, we noticed that this use was not permitted within the Sustainable Development Zoning District, and we felt like that should be an opportunity for that use to be there, should the opportunity present itself. So staff did add that to the amendment. So the change to the definition sets a minimum production amount at 300 barrels per year. The maximum of 15,000 barrels per year remains unchanged. And then we clarify that this use may include the sale of food. And then this is where we're proposing to strike the language that limits the maximum percentage of sales devoted to on-site consumption. This language applies to the bar, nightclub, wine bar, and tap room possible use. And then the supplemental standards, we are proposing that a microbrewery located in the B2 zoning district shall include a tasting room or retail space. That's our downtown district, so we want to ensure we have an active public space and not something that's devoted only to production. So we want to make sure we keep active uses downtown. Any questions on that amendment? And then finally, this is requested by staff and is simply a clarification. We've had some people that can't quite understand how the critical root zone is measured, so we're trying to make sure it's just crystal clear that the critical root zone is measured from the center of where the tree is located with a radius. So a 12-inch tree would have a radius of 12 feet. So that's the amendment there. Any questions about that amendment? Staff's recommending approval, and Planning Board also recommended approval at their March 11th meeting.
All right, thank you. Quick question, planning staff members, did this come unanimously in support?
Planning committee?
Planning staff, oh, sorry, planning,
Planning Board was unanimous.
no, sorry, planning committee. I thought this was, or number 2, right? Amendment number 2 was from the planning committee?
Yes,
What
and
about-
1.
and number
1
one?
and 2 were from
Right.
the Planning Committee.
So from number 1 and number 2, were those unanimous from the planning committee? That's my
Yeah,
question.
they were. There's a slight adjustment afterwards, if I recall.
But I mean,
Yes.
in the final
Basically,
form.
yes. In the final form, we both agreed.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, any questions for staff before we open the public hearing?
I do. I have kind of a general question. So it seems like the last 12 months or plus or minus, we've done a lot of UDO amendments. Where's this kind of, is it kind of as you guys realize our code needs to be updated, or where's these?
It's a variety of reasons. We get requests from the Planning Committee with ideas such as these two, so we proceed with those. Sometimes staff comes across something that's sometimes hard for people to understand, so we want to clarify that. You know, as time changed, development standards and practices change, so we want to be reflective of that. And it's not always something that can be done in a wholesale, let's just fix the whole thing at once. I've done that before in another community. Wouldn't recommend it necessarily. We did it here several years ago, and it's a very long, cumbersome, laborious process. So as we realize that there are improvements or necessary amendments, then we work on those and bring them forward to you.
We've also had several from the General Assembly. As they make changes, we have to make changes.
Yes, yes. So that's the other thing that's unpredictable. So
Yeah, and commenting on that, I actually
Right.
appreciate bite-sized reviews as opposed to trying to eat the whole cheeseburger at one time.
hey, I'm right there with you.
Not saying the UDO is a cheeseburger, but it's probably fresh beef, if it is. Any other questions for staff? All right, I'll go to public hearing. Open the public hearing, no one signed up, so I'll close the public hearing and refer the matter back to council. Discussion leading to a possible motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Discussion on the motion for approval.
Councilman Moyer, just to answer your question, the 1 and 2 came from me. I was
Yeah.
maybe there's an irony in being named Brett and liking beer, but
We'll call you Councilman Saison.
That's right. I was actually going for the other Brett that
Oh, I'm
became
sorry.
famous. But yeah, I was reading the ordinances related to these, and I think that some of the things maybe seem outdated. I also observed that certain establishments I think were operating illegally under our existing UDO, and they are establishments I think people in Apex appreciate now. And I don't know if they got in trouble, if they'd have to close or what, but I didn't want that to happen. So, and we remember we changed the brewery use. We allowed it downtown somewhat recently. And I got some feedback that, yeah, but the rules kind of make it hard to do it for it to work downtown. I think a vibrant downtown often has breweries at this point, and so trying to facilitate that. Those were my two. And
Thanks for doing that. Do you just have, like in your spare time, you just read the UDO?
sometimes.
Or drink beer. I mean,
One's related to alcohol-based businesses I take an interest in. It makes me sound like an alcoholic, but
Thanks for pointing that out.
yeah, like, and I think bars and nightclubs. I personally wanted the tap room and wine bar to be a separate use, and because I think that's more that'd be what we want more than nightclub. But I was told that was not the case. But I think if we try to put that in the definition of what it is, and can encourage that kind of thing, and the uses downtown that were allowed, they weren't previously allowed, and I think we want to be careful about what was allowed, and so that's why the special use and not just permitted was what we came down with. Hopefully it'll facilitate. I hope it facilitates this. I think it'll make a more vibrant downtown if some of these things go in place.
All right. Any other discussion on the motion for approval? All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, that passes unanimously. That concludes our public hearings. No old business. And so we now move to new business number 2, since number 1 has been removed from the agenda. Amanda Bunce.
Okay, this is a revision to the approved Pinnacle Park Master Subdivision Plan, which is located in the southeast portion of Apex, just north of Pinnacle Park off of Pinnacle Center Drive. It's a 6-lot subdivision that was approved a couple years ago, 2-3 years ago, and it is on Tech Flex conditional zoning and designated as light industrial on the 2045 land use map. And this is just a representation of the lots. We do have development constructed. Pentair is located here for reference purposes. So there is one amendment that is proposed to be made to this subdivision, and it's related to traffic. The subdivision plan was approved with a traffic condition based on concerns that resulted from the TIA that limited construction plan approvals to no more than 140,000 gross square feet of warehouse buildings and no more than 5,000 gross square feet of standalone office buildings. And any land uses that differed would have to construct an additional left turn lane on Reliance Avenue at 1010 and extend the existing left turn lane to provide a certain amount of dual left lane capacity, and to revise the traffic signal. There were some other improvements referenced in, as you can see, in this long condition. So the first development within the subdivision, Pentair, was clearly more office than anticipated than warehouses. And then the next 2 lots that came in there, we have site plans under review for the 2 lots south of that, were not warehouse related, but were more auto repair related uses and some office space. And so the trend is that it's not warehouse, but it's more business park office related uses. And so there was clearly a need to revise the condition. The approvals for the other 2 lots are held up until there's a resolution to this condition. And so the proposed revision is that total construction plan approvals for the subdivision shall be limited to no more than 60,000 gross square feet of commercial buildings prior to the developer paying a fee in lieu for an additional northbound left turn lane on Reliance Avenue at 1010 Road and extension of the existing left turn lane. So basically the fee in lieu is covering these improvements to provide approximately 250 feet of dual left turn lanes, subject to Town of Apex and DOT review. Total build-out of the subdivision shall be limited to 110,000 gross square feet. The gross square feet limitation was based on input we received from the developer. So in working with Russell, who's here to answer any questions that he's definitely going to have to answer these questions. They're all transportation, traffic related. But we basically have given what's already been developed, what's under review, and what's likely to be able to be built on the remaining lots, which do have some environmental limitations and other limitations on them. What square footage do you think you need? And so he provided that information, and we rounded up a couple thousand square feet from there with that condition. So staff is recommending approval of this change, and the planning board recommended approval at their March 11th meeting.
Okay, questions?
So I guess I was confused by this one. So the change is, maybe I need to summarize it. Maybe you can say I'm right. So we're not doing warehouse anymore. It's changed. The type of businesses have changed. So now it's trying to target those new type of businesses for the traffic improvements that may be needed.
I probably need to get Russell down here, but basically there was an update to look at the type of uses, because you can't just look at square footage. You have to look at uses, because the same square footage of different uses will yield different traffic.
As in, like, office may have a lot.
Office will have more than warehouse. So I'm going to turn it over to Russell.
Yeah, with warehouse uses, it's essentially storage, so you don't have a lot of trips going in and out during the day with a storage facility versus an office where you have a lot more employees. So when the subdivision plan originally came in and they ran the traffic, we made a recommendation for a dual left turn lane on Reliance Avenue, because right now we're still waiting for the widening to occur with the TIP project, which is now currently in the draft STIP, planned to begin in 2023. So we've still got a few years out from that. So the concern was with congestion on Reliance Avenue. We recommended a dual left turn lane. They were concerned about making that improvement, especially prior to the TIP project and all the complexity in that and having that torn up with the TIP project later. So what they proposed is a limitation on the types of uses in the development to lower that traffic generation, so it would go under that threshold to not require the turn lane improvement. So when Pentair came in, it essentially used up that trip budget. And they still had parcels left over. So with 2 new site plans coming in, we were faced with the issue of either they had to construct a dual left turn lane, which we went through some new analysis based on the increase in traffic, or pay a fee in lieu based on some assumption of trips and a dual turn lane they would otherwise construct. So what they're asking for is a fee in lieu, because the TIP project is a few years out. Building that dual turn lane would require quite a bit of improvement at the intersection with the traffic signal, and they're hoping they don't have to undertake that now. In that condition also, it allows up to 60,000 square feet prior to paying the fee in lieu. So what that would do is it basically says, and that's the threshold before you even have to do a TIA. So it allows some amount of development, which includes Pentair, and one additional parcel, which is currently the furthest along in our process that's pending prior to paying that fee in lieu. So where we are now is essentially with a staff recommended square footage of 110,000 square feet, because that's roughly where we were with the traffic analysis for the dual left turn recommendation based on a business park type use. Any increase in that, of course, increases traffic and potential congestion, but it doesn't mean we would necessarily recommend a longer dual left turn lane or higher fee in lieu, because you're getting to the point of sort of diminishing returns. You can only build the dual left turn lane so long to provide an improvement, because 1010 Road right now has not been widened. So, and that's really the improvement that needs to occur to improve this intersection.
What can the fee be applied to?
We anticipate applying that fee toward our contribution for the TIP project. The town will be required to contribute toward the project in the form of additional wide sidewalks and other kind of facilities, what we call enhancements as part of the DOT project. So we anticipate a significant contribution, much higher than this development would contribute. The TIP project is also building dual left turn lanes in their plans. So we would make the DOT aware that we have this additional money to apply toward the TIP project that we've collected in this case. Essentially, because we're sort of faced with, under the UDO, do we ask them to build it now, which you hear the argument against that and the reasons why they don't want to do that, versus a fee in lieu, because that would essentially mean that we're recognizing the traffic impact, but we're not just letting them off the hook and saying you don't have to do anything. You can just go ahead and keep building and wait for the TIP project. So those were the 2 choices we were looking at.
Right. What drove my question partly is I want to make sure that the post-construction of 1010's widening is essentially guaranteed to have the dual lefts that are needed. So even if they're not put in order to be destroyed a couple of years later, that they'll eventually be there.
Yeah, they'll be there.
Yeah.
As part of the project.
Okay.
And if the road redone,
Yes, thanks.
if the road is delayed, how's that going to play into anything? It will just be longer with some pain of the traffic.
Correct. The TIP. My understanding, it's not. I mean, it's under the draft STIP now. It would not be delayed any further than the 2023 beginning of construction. Okay. So there's going to be. There's going to be some pain out there during the construction. Obviously, there's going to be additional congestion from that, but we don't anticipate any further delays. It is a funded project, and it's moving forward.
Okay.
I guess I have some hesitation with respect to reducing the gross square footage for a couple of reasons. First of all, I guess, what percentage of Pinnacle Park is this little part of the development? Are we applying a whole lot of stuff to one little piece that should have been applied to everything else? And was that everything else then our responsibility?
It meets a 10% threshold. There's already congestion out there, so that's our litmus test to determine if it's already a failing movement and they're adding more than 10%, do they have to mitigate? In this case, they are. It's not a 50% increase. If you're asking how significant is it, it's just hitting that, it's basically just going over that 10% threshold.
Well, back to my question, what percentage of the total square footage of business out there is 110,000 square feet?
Well,
It just seems to me that,
Right.
once again, yeah, they might have hit that magic 10%.
mhm.
But we're still applying all of the requirements to one little group because they happen to go above this magic number.
Correct, and that's what we do for any development in that case. That's the only methodology we have to determine improvements. Another methodology might be if you had a mechanism to, instead of assigning off-site improvements, you collected a transportation fee from every development based on the trip potential, put that into a big pot, and then the town goes out and spends the money and does the improvement. But we don't have that kind of mechanism to do the off-site improvements for developers based on an assigned fee to everybody. So we basically have to go development by development and look at, when they trip a certain threshold. Now, we could change our ordinances and change that threshold. That's certainly an option too, but we've determined that if a movement's already failing, if it's a 10% increase, then that's typically the threshold we would want to apply.
Okay. Well, back to my original concern is reducing this just because we went from warehousing to office, and we're trying to get office. We don't want necessarily warehouse because that doesn't have the best of the jobs. So why would we want to decrease the square footage because office is coming in? I think it's counter to what we've been trying to do in the Economic Development Committee.
Right, and keep in mind this is an interim condition, so if you're talking about a difference between 110,000 square feet versus 145,000 square feet, when the TIP project's constructed, it's going to have ample capacity for that additional traffic load. But what we have to look at, based on the analysis, is an interim condition, and that's where we're applying the fee.
I'm not that worried about the fee at this point
Right.
right now. I'm concerned about reducing the 145,000 square feet down to 110.
Right, and I think that's the discretion of council to decide, because it's basically what we're setting is a threshold to establish a turn lane length and a fee. If it's something if you want more square footage, and you're comfortable with the turn lane recommendation, and you understand it's just going to be more congestion in the interim, then that's the decision you'd have to make.
To me, it is worthwhile to make that decision because if they can't get out, if Reliance gets congested, there's Lufkin as an alternative to this specific site. It's a little more circuitous, but it's a very well working intersection.
And frankly, it's
Lufkin at
not
this
much more circuitous. If
No.
you're going Reliance to turn left,
Yeah.
going Lufkin to the much more improved intersection is actually an easier route.
Yeah, I think
That
so.
would be my first choice, to be honest. If I'm a Pentair employee or somebody on that cul-de-sac, I'm going to go right turn, right turn, right turn, and then hit that intersection, because I might be just going straight across to get on one.
That's right. I agree.
I'd do that before I try to go to Reliance anyway, so.
Okay, so.
I think that's a
We have to
viable,
improve Reliance then, I guess.
well,
But I just don't think we should reduce the square footage.
sure.
For,
Okay.
for what you just said, and we both sit on the Economic Development Committee and are desirous to get more businesses like that, and apparently this developer is bringing us what we want,
Office.
office, yeah.
So this square footage is just setting the threshold to where a fee is collected?
Correct, yeah, that's what our analysis was based on, the 110,000 square
We're not restricting
feet.
the square footage of office that can go on the site, it's just when that fee is collected?
This condition would restrict it, so basically, if you're comfortable with the storage recommended, on which we're establishing the fee, if you want to just increase the square footage, then that's what you do in the condition. You would change the 110,000 square feet. You would change that 110,000 gross square feet to 145,000. That would provide them that ceiling. What we understand from them is they were first talking about maybe they could get 120,000 square feet, and then we discussed the trip, and comparing to a previous trip generation, we were looking at more like 110,000 to be equivalent to roughly 1,900 to 2,000 trips per day. So really what you're talking about, going from 110, which is about 2,000 vehicles per day, up to 145,000 square feet is about 2,600 vehicles per day, roughly, for the total site. But again, they didn't think they could get there, but if you provide them the additional square footage, they might be able to get another user in there pending a site plan.
I would certainly want to do that, to go to the 145,000 square feet. I can understand the 60,000. I'm okay with that, but why restrict?
I agree.
And accept the fee in lieu.
And accept the fee in lieu. But just change that 110 back up to 145. Okay.
All right, this being a new business item, I just want to take a look back and see, is there, I'm not seeing anybody jumping out of their chair yet, so let me see if there's a motion that we want to make with, and maybe I'll turn to Councilman Jensen. How would you like to make the motion?
Like Biden, I'll get tongue-tied, but I'll do my best.
We'll be patient.
Okay,
And we'll allow
reaction to that change.
that. Yeah, you start with that sentence. And what would you?
He can make a motion to approve the amendment as proposed, but striking 110 and putting 145 in its place.
And that's what I was going to say.
Okay. Well, that was very simple. I don't know why you made it sound like it was going to be complicated.
You got in my way.
No. All right. So, can I take that as a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to pass the item as requested with the changing of the 110,000 to 145,000 square feet.
Okay. Second.
I'll second that.
All right. We have a motion and a second to take what was proposed, but modifying the gross square feet from 110,000 to 145,000.
So I didn't hear a reaction from staff for that change. Do you guys have any opinions about those changes, like negative ones?
Just
Okay.
what Mr. Dalton said.
Okay.
Could I ask maybe members of the audience who are in the commercial development business to maybe give their input on what they think the potential of this site might be? I mean, I know it's a new business item, but I didn't know what the professionals in that industry might see for potential. Like, is this all for naught, or do they think that there's some potential there for us to bring more users in?
I don't think that we're restricting anything. I think we're making this a little more free.
Yeah.
So,
I agree.
but I just don't want to. I don't want to turn this into a show. I'm sorry, no offense, but I want to focus on the item at hand. And I don't know that it changes much of our thoughts, but we certainly can hear from them at some point. But I just would rather move forward. I appreciate the request, though. We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion to approve with the change? All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, that passes unanimously. And thank you for presenting that to us. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Takes us to new business number 3, which is council members Killingsworth and Dozier. I'll let you decide who begins since there are 2 names listed.
All right, so as you know, this month is Women's History Month, so this is a little bit of information on Women's History Month and then a resolution. So did you know that the first official request for women to be able to vote, for women to have the right to vote, was in 1648? We didn't get that right to vote until 1920. In 1850, Harriet Tubman joined the Underground Railroad, and in that same year, Sojourner Truth began speaking about women's rights. It wasn't until 1923 that the Equal Rights Amendment was introduced in Congress, and every year after until it finally passed in 1972. Now the states must ratify it. It's a simple thing to protect our equality, not in philosophy, but in our Constitution. It is now 2019, and we still do not have equal protection under our Constitution. One more state is all that is needed to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. Over the history of the United States, states treated women differently according to their own whims. Some demanding women not speak, not work in certain jobs, be paid less, not promoted, not given insurance, not allowed to own their own property, not allowed control of money, not allowed to vote, not allowed to run for office, not allowed to hold positions of leadership, not allowed access to education, not allowed to defend the self and or children against many forms of assault, not allowed contraceptives, sterilized against their will, and other similar procedures, not allowed access to businesses, schools, clubs, not allowed to feed their children, and not allowed to live in certain places. History has forgotten our contributions and is just now digging them out to present to the world as truth. In 1916, Jeanette Pickering Rankin was the first white woman elected to Congress. In 1968, Shirley Chisholm was the first black woman to be elected to Congress. 1989, Ross Lehtinen was the first Latino woman to be elected to Congress. 2018, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland became the first Native American women to be elected to Congress. It has taken 102 years for all of us women to be represented for all that we are. There were many women who invented things, wrote things, discovered things, created things who were not credited for these things. That credit for most of these ideas and items were claimed by men that they worked with, friends, and family. Women make up 51% of the population of North Carolina and the U.S., but only make up 25% of Congress. White women make 80%, Hispanic women make 53%, and black women make 60% of what white men make for equal work. Right here in the town of Apex, we have 108 men and 32 women as department heads, managers, team leads, and supervisors. For staff, we have 349 men and only 92 women. Women within Apex that specifically need to be recognized for their contributions to our history. Mary Crutchfield Baldwin, for whom St. Mary AME Church and St. Mary's Hospital were named for. Julia Montgomery Street, a famous author of children's books. And Clarice Atwater, the first African American and woman on the town council. To celebrate women's history is to remember all of it.
So Women's History Month Resolution, March 2019. Whereas in the United States of America, Women's History Month traces back to the first International Women's Day in 1911 and was extended to Women's History Week in 1978. And whereas Sarah Lawrence College, the Women's Action Alliance, and the Smithsonian Institution collaborated to host the first Women's History Conference in 1979 over 15 days. And whereas in 1980, President Jimmy Carter issued a proclamation declaring National Women's History Week, stating, "From the first settlers who came to our shores, from the first American Indian families who befriended them, men and women have worked together to build this nation. Too often the women were unsung and sometimes their contributions went unnoticed." And whereas that a year later, Congress provided bipartisan support and in 1987 went further to extend the week to Women's History Month. And whereas the United States of America has recognized March as Women's History Month since 1988. And whereas the theme of 2019 is Visionary Women, Champions of Peace and Nonviolence. And whereas the state of North Carolina has recognized March as Women's History Month. And
whereas women of every race, ethnicity, and background have made contributions to the growth and strength of our nation in countless recorded and unrecorded ways. And whereas women have historically played and continue to play a crucial economic, cultural, and social role in every sphere of the life of the nation by constituting a significant portion of the workforce inside and outside the home. And whereas women have played a unique role throughout the history of the nation by providing the majority of the volunteer labor force of the nation. And whereas American women of every race, ethnicity, and background have been leaders not only in securing their own rights of freedom, suffrage, and equal opportunity, also in the abolitionist movement, the emancipation movement, and the industrial labor movement, the civil rights movement, and other movements, especially the peace movement, which create a more fair, just, and inclusive society for all people. And whereas despite these contributions, celebration this month acknowledges the role of American women in history has been consistently overlooked and undervalued in the literature, teaching, and study of American history. Therefore, let it be resolved that the town of Apex recognizes March 2019 as Women's History Month.
All right.
So I will make a motion to approve this resolution.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second for approving the resolution. Discussion?
Nice job.
All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, that passes unanimously. We now have concluded all of our open items. We now have two closed session items on our agenda. One is so I'd like to see if someone will make a motion to go into closed session to consider and establish the town's negotiating position with respect to property acquisition, and also to go into closed session to consult with the town attorney regarding the matter of A.B. Goodrich Contracting LLC v. Town of Apex and Stewart Cooper Newell Architects, PA. Is there so motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, discussion? All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. All right, we're now going into closed session. We've reached the end of our agenda. I expect we will have no further discussions in open session. Thank you very much.